Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on November 27th, 2012, picking up where we left off in the last video. And what we're working on here is in this chapter, we are working on drawing in our WeWikiPaint application. So I have got some Spike code that actually will follow the mouse around and, draw stuff, which is awesome. The only problem here is that it's just Spike code. It isn't tested. And as I mentioned in the last episode, the reason we write the Spike code is so that it's because it's much easier to understand how to test something if you know how to program it. And I didn't know how to program the drag and drop code up until now. But now we've got some stuff that's working, which is cool. And now I'd like to see it actually get developed using test-driven development. So let's get this show started. We have a clean repository and our tests are passing. So now we need to actually write those tests. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got here. We've got in our test code, we are initializing a drawing area and then appending it to the document body, or creating the drawing area, appending it to document body, and then initializing it, and then looking to see that we have what we expect. Okay, and we're saying that it should have the same dimensions and it should draw a line. Okay, so this is all looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and factor out. There's a lot of code here relative to the actual production code. If we take out our Spike code, I think the only thing in here that's not Spike code is that line right there. This is all Spike code, so we should be able to, yeah, it still passes. Okay, so since we're starting with some actual TDD here, I want to make sure things are cleaned up. And it's reasonably good, but I'm not loving it. Let's go ahead and add a before each function. And in that before each, let's go ahead and put the drawing area. That will make the purpose of this remove a lot more obvious. And clean up some of that duplication. That comment's kind of obvious. That's duplicated. That's duplicated. Okay, so there we go. It says I'm missing a semicolon on line 14, which I am. And before each is not defined. That is a global issue. Lint complaining, not the actual test. Okay, so that worked. And nicely, we've fixed that. Okay. Well, I'm procrastinating a little bit, but it's always nice to start with a clean slate, or not so much a clean slate, but a clean work area before you start doing something potentially difficult. And this is definitely on the potentially difficult side. Now what we need to do, I guess what I'd like to do is sort of take this in the same way that we took the Spike, which is in really small steps and really simple approach. So I'll start out by just seeing if we can simulate a click somewhere in the drawing area, and then we'll see that we're seeing a line drawn from 0, 0 to that click location. So let me just do a little bit more cleanup here. We'll inline this, inline that, oops, and inline that. And let's factor this out into a method called paper elements. Or maybe just elements. There, let's clean that test up a little bit. Just trying to make the code a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to understand. So now we initialize the drawing area. You know, we do that over and over again. We can probably cut that out and put that up here. Got a lint error on because elements was the name of the function. And we've got a complaint on line 45. Oh, because I pulled out the initialized drawing area, we don't have access to the paper variable. But that's easily fixed. So run that. Oh, that it did not work. Yeah, it really did not work. And I'm guessing it's because we have var elements. So this is a tricky little thing in JavaScript. JavaScript does something called hoisting, which means that this is actually equivalent to this code. So I've said var elements is undefined, then elements equals elements, and I'm calling a function, here, but actually it's been overridden by this variable. So that's a bit tricky. We will just rename this to V for now. See if that fixes it. Yes. And let's go ahead and rename this to be drawing elements. And then we can rename this back to elements. Okay. So going to continue doing some cleanup here. And you know what? I think it should be initialized with Raphael is kind of redundant. If these other tests are working, then I think that test is good. So let's go ahead and take that out. Yeah. Okay. Now we're starting to get fairly clean. The one thing I don't like is that this number is not at all obvious, but I don't see a clean way of fixing that right now. I think as we write more tests, that will become more obvious. And also, we've spent quite a bit of time on cleanup here, and I think it's like to move on. It may turn out that this episode is just about cleanup. That's okay. You have to spend time on cleanup. A lot of people overemphasize features and don't do cleanup, and then their code turns into a mess and becomes really hard to modify. So cleanup's important, and this is a good time to do it right before we start getting into this new feature. So let's go ahead and just look at this. And this. And this. Okay. And Vlad Gurdiga made a great suggestion about using element.getBoundingBox. So what would happen if we did that? Let's go ahead and check in the code we've got so far. And this will be cleaned up the client tests. And let's just see what happens here if we say console.dump. Well, actually, rather than commenting this out, let's just dump out get bounding box and see what that says. I think that's just dump. Okay. Doesn't say. Well, let's turn that into a JSON string and see what it says. X20, Y30, that gives us the right answer. And it works cross-platform. Well, Vlad, I think you've hit the jackpot on that one. Width 10, height 270, XY, X2, XY. That looks really promising. So let's go ahead and comment this out. I don't want to delete it just yet. But that is really handy. The reason I don't want to get rid of it is because this is pretty high level, and if we've got issues, cross-platform issues that don't show up from this high level option, it's useful to go back down into these details. But this looks really promising. So let's go ahead and try that. So instead of doing, we'll just say return im plus, I guess the box is going to be element.getBoundingBox, and then we're going to say box.x plus box.y plus comma plus box.x2 plus box.y2. And I think we want that to be m x comma y l x comma y. So let's try that. It's complaining about the semicolon, but actually I've left out a plus sign. Ooh, that works. Okay, so we can get rid of that. All right. Okay, so what I've just done here is in the previous chapter, we spent all this time trying to figure out how to get into the internals of Raphael, and we wrote this code here. And Vlad Gurdiga made a suggestion that we use the get bounding box method on elements, on Raphael elements, and that returns the same information that we need, which means we've just cleaned up a huge amount of code, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note to delete the Raphael internals code. That's going to be path for VML, path for SVG. All right. So that brings us to the end of our time for this episode. Not a very exciting episode, but again, this sort of cleanup is really important. We've managed to, if we had deleted these two functions that we're no longer using, and I'm only keeping them around just in case, if we had been able to delete those, we would have cut the size of this test code dramatically. And that's really important because we're about to get into some hard stuff. So next time, that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually start doing the mouse event code and continue on with test driving our drag and drop. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.